Okay, and the name of the person being interviewed is Robert, any middle initial?
W.
What's that for?
William, and I'm the third.
Robert?
Robert William Burns the third.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, when's your birthday?
January 31st, 1980.
And your current address?
5829 Dusky Wing Drive, Rockledge, Florida, 32955.
And we have Ian Fife, Joshua Harper, and myself, Carlton Cartwright. The institutional affiliation is the Children's Coalition Incorporated. Robert, did you serve during any wartime activity?
Yeah, I was in OIF.
What is that?
Operation Iraqi Freedom, and also Operation New Dawn.
What was your rank when you separated?
Staff Sergeant.
Where did you serve again? One more time.
In Mosul, Iraq.
Were you drafted or enlisted?
Enlisted.
What branch of the service?
Army.
Where were you living at the time that you went into the service?
I was living in Palm Bay, Florida.
And I apologize. You enlisted, correct?
Correct.
Why did you join the Army?
I ran track in college, and then I had an opportunity to run track for the United States military. So I decided to join, left college and joined the Army and pursued that career.
Where did you go into boot camp?
Where?
Where?
I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I was in the first male-female integrated basic training at Fort Sill. This is an interesting story. When I walked into the recruiter's office, it's usually a joint office between all the services. And I was walking to the Air Force office, but they were at lunch. And the Army recruiter saw me, knew who I was, and told me to come on in there. I never made it to the Air Force office.
So they got you, huh?
They got me.
Okay. What was basic training like? Where'd you go to basic training?
I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. It was a good experience. I had real good drill sergeants. They were very disciplined. Had a great group of guys and girls that I was with. I'm still friends with them today. It was my first time in a place like Oklahoma. Saw some tornadoes while we were out at field training, tarantula spiders, and then it got pretty cold. Didn't get too cold in Florida, but it got cold out there in basic.
What were you doing before you went into service?
I went to college at Abilene Christian University, and I ran into some racism issues there. It was my first time in Texas, and came back home to Florida. So.
Okay. I'm thinking about what were you doing prior to going into service?
Right before going into service, I was working at a place called Mercury something Technologies, just as an office manager, and I was trying to get into the University of Florida to pursue my track career, but since I left the previous school, I lost my scholarship and wasn't able to get into the University of Florida during that semester because at that time, I owed money to the previous university, so I was just working.
So, what war you went? You said you were in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
What war was that at that time?
That was Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn.
Where did you go?
I landed on 9/11/2009, and I left December 10th, 2010.
What was basic training like?
It was pretty good. I mean, it was instilled a lot of discipline. I saw people from all over the country, from different walks of life, and we built a lot of camaraderie together. Learned a lot about having a battle buddy and holding each other accountable. So I was thankful for the experience and the drill instructors that I had.
What year did you serve?
I came in July '99,
And separated?
January 2017.
And you said that you stayed in touch with a lot of people?
Mm-hmm.
You still do?
Still do, even today.
Cool. Wow.
Yeah.
That's exceptional. So, again, back to basic training. What was it like? What did you... First of all, what was your job?
I enlisted as a combat medic and then went on to nursing school.
Wow. So, where was the nursing school? Where'd you do basic at?
At Fort Hill, Oklahoma.
All right, so then you went to tech school for medical.
Mm-hmm.
Where was that?
That was at Fort Sam Houston, Texas.
How long was it?
Combat medic school, I believe, was 16 weeks, and then nursing school was another year on top of that.
How long was basic?
I think basic was 10 weeks at the time.
So after medical school, where'd you go?
We went to Augusta, Fort Gordon, Georgia, for our clinical portion of nursing school. And then after that, I went to Fort Hood, Texas. Then I went to Camp Casey, Korea. Then from there...
All right, so let's back up.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the first place?
Fort Gordon, Georgia, in Augusta.
What were you doing there?
I was doing the clinical portion of my nursing school.
How long was that?
That was a year.
And after that?
Went to Fort Hood, Texas.
For?
A year.
For?
It was my first duty station. I was a senior line medic in a tank battalion, 112 Cavalry.
Wow. How were your instructors from basic to your tech training? How are the instructors?
They're pretty good instructors. They were all seemed to be experts in their field. All had real life experiences. Was able to teach us more than what was just the didactic portion. They were able to, give us the experiences that they've done in doing the job. And so we had a good expectation of what to expect once we actually got out to do our jobs. So they were all professional. We didn't have any drama or any, behavioral issues, no fraternization type things with my instructors at all.
You have to forgive me, I have to keep the time. So, in your estimation, basic training to tech school, how much time did that take up?
Almost 2 years. It was almost the first 2 years of my career.
And what is your total amount of service time?
17 and a half years. I'm medically retired January 2017.
Okay. Got it. All right, so after the tech training, where'd you go?
To Fort Hood, Texas.
And what was your, okay, so what was your job there?
I was a senior line medic in a tank battalion.
How long were you there?
I was there for almost exactly a year.
What was that like?
That was different. Back in Texas, but not as a trainee, as an actual soldier in a combat arms unit with a bunch of tankers, war fighters, and it was a good experience. Learned a lot, had my own track. They called us mechanics. Spent most of our time in the motor pool, PMCS in our tracks, and going to the field and doing exercises. So learned quite a bit about field activities, learned a lot about tanks, got to shoot some tanks, drive some tanks. It's a good experience.
And camaraderie, in other words, like, what was the experience like with other soldiers, so to speak?
So most people don't know that I'm biracial. I'm black and white. My father was white, my mom was black, which is kind of unusual, especially back in the time that I was growing up. But most of the soldiers in my platoon were Hispanic, and they thought that I was either Puerto Rican or Dominican. And my first day in the motor pool, they had a tamale truck that would come by, and they asked me if I liked tamales. And I was like, hell yeah, I love tamales. I've never seen a tamale in my life. And when they handed me the tamale, I grabbed it and tried to bite it. And I was like, man, these are tougher than I'm used to. And they're like, you don't know what the hell a tamale is. I was like, no. So that's when they found out that I wasn't Hispanic at all. And, we just became a good group of brothers, from there on out.
Okay. So that was in Texas?
Yep.
Where was the next place that you went?
From there, I got orders to go to Korea. I was at Camp Casey, Korea.
What did you do there?
Same thing. Ended up in another armor battalion. It was Deuce Tank up in close to the DMZ.
And was there any conflict?
We had a couple of instances where North Koreans had flown over the DMZ and we got alerted. But other than that, just some normal scuffles with some of the local nationals, but nothing, newsworthy.
Okay. How long were you in Korea?
18 months.
Where'd you go after that?
That went back to Fort Sam Houston in San
For?
Antonio for 6 years.
What were you doing there? What was the job?
Nursing. We went to the hospital there, Brooke Army Medical Center, and worked on the burn unit, worked in the ICU there, the surgical trauma ICU. This is right when the war was starting to kick off, and started treating some of our first injured soldiers in Iraq.
So a lot of casualties? Or?
Lots of casualties.
How many?
More than I could count. We got most of like I said, I worked on the burn unit, which was a horrible place to work, just a really emotionally draining experience.
Where were they coming in from?
Iraq and Afghanistan. Basically, they would be evac to Longstool, and then once they got stabilized enough there to make the flight to Fort Sam, they would come straight there to Lackland Air Force Base. We'd pick them up in a equivalent of an ICU ambulance and bring them to the hospital.
How long were you there?
6 years. 6 years.
You have any kind of estimation as to how many veterans you served?
It's in the thousands. It would be in the thousands.
How did you deal with that?
It was tough at the beginning. I had not deployed at the time yet, and I was dealing with some pretty severe injuries with some of those soldiers. 80, 90% of their bodies burned. There's about a 1% survival rate of those kinds of injuries, and just the long, drawn-out process of having to go through hundreds of surgeries for an individual to look at the social dynamic and their family dynamics of them dealing with, their spouse or father or son being burned or amputated. Just so many different aspects of with those injuries, how they impact not only the soldier but the families, and just watching the soldiers dealing with, not being able to go back to their units because of amputations, or they feel like they left their brothers that are still deployed. There's a lot, so it's just not just treating the injuries, it's kind of treating the entire person and the family.
So your capacity was medical, correct?
Correct.
All right, so did you have side-by-side assistance with mental health, social services?
Yep. My last position there, we created what was called the Warrior Transition Unit, where it began to help soldiers who were injured that were going to have to transition out of the military into civilian service. It used to be called medical hold. So I was a platoon sergeant for that. So there was a triad of care that encompassed not only their medical care, but their mental health care, and then the social work side part of it as well, helping them to get employment, find a place to live, a house that accommodates their disability needs, those types of things, along with the mental health aspect of it. PTSD was still quite of a stigma at that time.
I would imagine you accumulated a lot of experience from the mental health component.
Correct.
Okay. Well, tell me about two of the most memorable experiences that you had during that period. I know you had a ton. So if you could just...
One of the ones that impacted me the most, there was a soldier that was in that WT unit with me. He was one of two people who had survived being burned 80% of their body. And the way that you calculate the mortality rate for a burn victim is you take the percentage of their body surface area that was burned, his was 80, and you add that to their age. He was 26. So that's 106. That's the percentage chance that he has to not live. So it's 100%.
Survive.
Right. So it's 106% chance that he would not make it, and he did. So he's one of the two with over 80% that lived. He had gone through, hundreds of surgeries. He did not look like a normal person. Lots of, physical deformities, burns on his face, skin grafts all over the place. He was from Miami, and that's how we kind of connected. We were both from Florida. I was actually born in Fort Lauderdale, and he had a beautiful girlfriend. And once he got out and was able to travel, he decided he was going to go propose to her. So I actually went with him to the mall to go pick out this engagement ring, and he took leave and he flew down to Miami to propose to her, and she laughed at him, and it devastated him, because he had literally gone through almost 2 years worth of medical treatment to get to the point where he was. And he came back and was not able to handle that rejection and didn't think that he would ever be accepted by, another woman. And it really took a toll on him. So one morning he called me about 1 o'clock in the morning and told me that he was going to take his own life. And I jumped in my car and was flying, to his address. And I called the police on the other line to try to get them to get there. And I'm doing 100 miles an hour down 281 in San Antonio. By the time we got there, he had already taken his life. And it was heartbreaking. And it's just one story of the emotional toll that, working in the medical field on that side takes on you.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch my breath here. Okay. How many of those did you have? I mean, that's a hard question. So you had a crop of those to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine?
Yeah.
Was that the first one or the second? I asked you for two.
That was the first one. The second one at that location was when I was working in the surgical trauma ICU. There was a soldier that had just graduated from AIT out at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, and he was driving from there to Fort Polk, Louisiana, to see his dad, who was a chief warrant officer up there. And along that trip, he was going over a 4-day weekend, which probably wasn't enough time to make that travel. He fell asleep at the road and drove headfirst into a bridge embankment, and ended up coming up to my ICU. He was 19 years old, and I had to call his father and his family to let them know that his son had been in a tragic accident, and to try to help get them there safely and accommodate them once he got there. And the son at that point was already, he was alive, but he was basically brain dead. And once the family got there, I tried to, accommodate them, get them a hotel room and things like that. You can imagine the distress that the family was under. He was also recently married, and his wife was only 17, so there was some issues that we ran into there because she was considered a minor but she was married
Who was the minor?
his wife.
How old was she?
She was 17. The father and I talked several times, and basically they were praying for a miracle that he was going to wake up and walk out of there. And there was one, probably 3 days into it, he asked me to come out to the hallway with him, and he asked me just to be straight up with him and ask my opinion if I thought his son would ever come out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to tell him no. And, in my experience, those kinds of severity of injuries, that was probably not going to happen. His wife, his mom, the soldier's mom, would not believe that. She believed that through the power of prayer that her son was going to be healed and come out of there, but I knew that was highly unlikely. And when I told him that, he grabbed my hand. We were in the hallway. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he just fell against a wall and just slid down. And just this chief warrant officer, helicopter fighter pilot, just broke down in tears. And at the time, I had just had my own son, was just born a few months ago. And it was just an emotional moment. And his son ended up not making it, but he did. We were able to talk them into allowing him to become an organ donor, since he was a 19-year-old healthy guy otherwise. He just had head injuries. And they agreed to do that, and through his organ donation, we're able to help a lot of people all over the country. 6 months later, after all that happened, I got a letter in the mail through the hospital. It was from his father, thanking me for being, with them through that time, and allowing and convincing them to do the organ donation so that they felt like their son, is still here and contributed to help other people's lives, even though he lost his. So that was the first kind of letter I ever got like that, and it was pretty impactful, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, I'm like texting the president, like I'm so, okay. So you've been through a bunch of these.
Mm-hmm.
That's apparent. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. After that, I deployed, and I was on a military transition team. We were advisors to the Iraqi army. And I was on a corps level team, so we lived with the Iraqis. We weren't on a traditional FOB or army base. And as a result of that, it was us. We were a 12-man team, and we depended on ourselves for everything. My role was a medical advisor to the Iraqi army, and I was also the medic for our team. I was responsible for everybody's health care. As a result of that kind of mission, we were witness to many things that the average deployment soldier wouldn't be. And it was because of some incidents where children were either killed, blown up, burned up. That was kind of the turning point for me. I'm diagnosed with PTSD now, and as a result of some of those events, seeing that kids that we tried to help with schools, school supplies, things like that, to be killed, and the manner in which they were killed was a lot. So at that point, that's kind of when I decided that once I was retired, that I would probably be done with healthcare from a patient standpoint.
How do you feel about the support that you've gotten since then? I mean, not saying really since then. I mean, during that entire, I'm like, even like, just to even ask you how many, or even try to comprehend.
How many people, like?
I mean, I sort of need a number
Mm-hmm.
for how many of these instances that you had, and I actually hate to ask you.
I've had 6 soldiers that have worked for me that or somewhere in my chain that committed suicide, all by gunshot wounds. And then I've probably as far as incidents like kids being killed, like it's probably 200 to 300.
So what kind of effect? How have you survived this?
I was doing well. After I returned from deployment, I went to Fort Carson, Colorado, working at the hospital there, and I had sustained some
So
injury.
that was okay. So you went to Fort Carson after Iraq.
Right.
All right, and how long were you there?
I was there for 2 years. While deployed, I had sustained some injuries myself. I went into a building that was on fire to pull soldiers out of there, and as a result, I got trapped in the building, and my lungs, I got an inhalation injury. My lungs were burned up from breathing in the superheated oxygen in the room.
So that's how you got your disability.
Right. So after that, I've had difficulty, respiratory issues, and then consequently heart issues in addition to that. And a couple of TBI, explosions and things like that, some head injuries, but those were minor compared to the respiratory and heart issues. So going to Fort Carson in a higher level elevation than I'm used to is when I started really seeing the extent of those injuries.
Personally.
Right. Ended up leaving Carson and going to my last duty station, which was Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina. One day, it was Valentine's Day weekend. We were driving to church, and
What year was that?
This was 2014.
Uh-huh.
I was driving to church with my family, and I had issues already with driving around high buildings because I was often the gunner for our team. So I was always on the 50 cal on our Humvee. And
what is a 50 cal?
It's a 50 cal is a high caliber machine gun. Mm-hmm. It's a crew serve weapon mounted to the top of the Humvee. So we either had that weapon mounted or the 240 Bravo, which is a lower caliber machine gun.
All right, so when you came out of the service, your benefits, have you had any problem getting any of your benefits?
No, fortunately, I was able to, when I was going through the medical board process, everything was done before me separated from the service. So I was found to be 100% rating disabled with the Army and with the VA. And so by the time I had actually retired, everything was already taken care of.
Okay, so besides your medical, did you use the VA or GI Bill for any additional benefits?
I haven't used my GI Bill yet. While I was still active duty, I took advantage of as many educational programs as I could. I was able to go to Harvard Business School. I got about 7 certifications from Harvard Business School on strategic planning, emotional intelligence, project management, a bunch of different areas of study, all for free. I still have $40,000 in the Army College Fund, and I also have my GI Bill in addition to that. Since I am 100% disabled, my children also get to go to any Florida university for free. If not, I could have just signed it over to them, but I'll probably take some more classes once I get some more time, after the campaigns are over.
Are you running for office or you're in office?
No, I'm not running for office. I'm the kingmaker, so to speak, not the king. So from my experience in strategic planning, I've found it to be very beneficial for me in this career field. So I like what I do, and I feel like it's a big responsibility because I feel like if I'm going to help someone on a campaign that they will win, so I want to make sure that those are the right people that I'm working for that should be in office. I want to work for someone that I don't think should be there.
Short question. How did you stay in touch with your family the entire time you were in the service, or was there ever any disconnect, for like you call them back home?
No, my family, I have a very large family, very supportive family. And, I would call them on Thanksgiving. They usually all get together at my grandmother's house, 20, 30 people, and, eating sweet potato pie and, showing me what they're eating. And I've got a box of cornflakes or something. But they always kept good contact, send me stuff, write me letters, wherever I may be.
How's the food in the service?
It was hit or miss, depending on where you were. Surprisingly, during deployment, when we were able to go to some of the Army bases, they had incredible food, like crab legs, lobster tails. It was insane. But I had got used to eating on the Iraqi market. I was used to eating things that traditionally Americans don't eat. And when I came back home, it took me a while to get used to eating greasy, hamburger stuff again.
Okay. All right. So you had everything that you needed. It's apparent that there was a lot of pressure and stress. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's correct.
There's a ton of that, right?
Yeah.
You need to say that in your own words instead of me saying that for you.
Yeah, it was a lot, in a couple of words, it was a lot, and nothing can really prepare you for those experiences until they happen. And fortunately, we have people in place to help you with those things if you are strong enough to recognize that you need the help with them. Unfortunately, some people don't, and there's several reasons for that. There's a stigma associated with it. You can be viewed as weak, especially in the combat arms arena. So soldiers try to deal with things on their own, or they try to cope with them, through different vices, so to speak, whether it be alcohol or other kinds of substance abuse or compulsive behaviors, and they end up harming themselves or ruining their careers, while they're trying to deal with the things that soldiers deal with. Fortunately, I had a good support system. I had enough intestinal fortitude to kind of, seek the help that I knew that I needed, and I was glad that I got it. I benefited from it. My family benefited from it. My kids benefited from it. So,
as a parent, I just want to compliment and applaud you.
Yeah, I actually did a 5-week inpatient program. It's called CSARP for PTSD. And it took a lot to do that, to make that commitment, but that was really the turning point for me to get back on the right track.
How you feeling these days?
I feel pretty good. I feel like I'm adding value to my community. I stay pretty much involved wherever I can, volunteering, advising our local officials on other community issues that are going on, and trying to just raise my kids to be good citizens too. So.
Okay. It's only one last question.
Okay.
So, in your estimation, what is the effect that this has had? How do you feel about war? What's the impact? How do you sort of sum up the effect that this has had on you? How do you feel about the impact on populations of the world? What kind of impact has the military had on you? And how do you feel about things going forward? That's the last question.
Okay. I feel like the military, I'm grateful for all my experiences, the good ones, the bad ones, the horrible ones, because they've kind of shaped, me to the man that I am now. Would I rather not been through some things? Absolutely. Do I think that the war that we're currently in is, a good one? Absolutely not. I think it is a complete waste of time, a complete waste of life and sacrifice and resources. next year there'll be kids deploying to Iraq that weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. And that's how long we've been there, and we don't have anything to show for it positively. We are trying to do something that hasn't been able to be accomplished there for thousands of years, and that's changed the minds of the people that live there. And we're not going to do it 6 and 12 months at a time, for however many decades we decide to stay there. They've been like that since the beginning of time, and they're going to continue to be like that. We can't force our ideologies or traditions or cultures or way of life on them. It's just they will keep taking our resources and keep taking what we leave there and to keep taking our money, and nothing will change. Nothing has changed. So, I have a little bit of animosity about that situation because of the friends that I've lost, because of what I've lost personally, my own sacrifices. And at the end of the day, we can't say that America is greater for it, and we can't say that Iraq and Afghanistan are greater for it. We can probably say they're worse for it if you ever go there and look around. It's not a nice place to be. So, but I am proud of my service. I'm proud of the people that I've served with and what they've sacrificed and the commitments that they've made to this country. And I continue to try to serve, now as a civilian, as a retired soldier. And I'm thankful for the service for giving me kind of the drive to do that. And it's made me realize how lucky we are to be where we are in America and what we have here compared to other countries that don't have so much opportunity and freedom.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
How old are you?
I'm 39.
How old do you feel?
I feel 48 probably.
That's not too bad. I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for the interview.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate it.
Cut.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.